burden, Dad. You always have been. Pack what fits in one bag. You're not coming back. Those were my son-in-law's exact words, spoken on the afternoon of my 67th Thanksgiving. Not shouted, not whispered in a moment of stress he'd regret later. Said calmly, the way you tell someone the weather. My daughter stood 3 feet behind him in the kitchen doorway, not correcting him, not looking at me, just studying the floor tiles like she was counting grout lines. I am Wallace Merritt. I spent 31 years as a structural inspector for the city of Columbus, Ohio. I have walked across bridges in January sleet-checking cable tension by hand. I have flagged condemned buildings while contractors argued with me to my face. I know what something looks like when the foundation has been quietly rotting for years while the surface looks fine. I just never thought I'd miss those signs in my own house. Before I tell you what happened after that Thanksgiving, you need to understand what I walked into. My wife Barbara died of a stroke 2 years earlier, fast and without warning, on a Tuesday morning while she was making oatmeal. We had been married 41 years. After she passed, my daughter Renee, our only child, called me every Sunday for 6 months without missing a week. Then the calls got shorter. Then they moved to every other Sunday. Then one Saturday afternoon, she and her husband Preston showed up at my house with brochures for a financial advisor and the quiet, practiced energy of people who had rehearsed a conversation in the car ride over. Dad, you shouldn't be alone in that house. It's too big for one person. Preston thinks, and I agree, that it makes more sense for you to move in with us. Think of the money you'd save. I should have heard what was underneath that. I didn't. I was 65 and grieving, and the idea of Sunday dinners with my granddaughter Lily, she was 9 at the time, felt like something worth holding on to. So I sold the house Barbara and I had lived in for 22 years. I sold it for $380,000, and I put most of that, along with my savings from the pension, into a joint account that Renee and I were both on, because Preston said it would simplify things for taxes and household expenses. That was my mistake. Not the only one, but the one that opened the door to everything else. The 18 months I lived in their house were not cruel at first. They were just slowly diminishing. Preston worked in commercial real estate and had a habit of explaining things to me. How the dishwasher worked, what the recycling rules were in their neighborhood, when it was and wasn't appropriate to be in the living room when he had clients over on video calls. Renee deferred to him in the particular way of someone who has decided that peace in a marriage requires surrender on every front. When I mentioned once that Preston had spoken to me sharply in front of Lily, Renee said, "Dad, he's under a lot of pressure right now," and changed the subject. I ate dinner with them. I helped with Lily's homework. I watched my granddaughter light up when I built her a birdhouse in the garage on weekends, and that was real. That was genuine, and I held on to it the way you hold on to a rope in a current. But the house itself felt smaller every month. My room was the one at the end of the hallway with the window that faced the neighbor's fence. I started taking walks in the morning just to be outside a space that didn't make me feel like a piece of furniture no one knew what to do with. Thanksgiving that year, Renee's side cooked and Preston's family came over. His brother and sister-in-law and their 2 teenagers. Loud kids who took over the TV room immediately. I had spent 2 days making Barbara's sweet potato casserole from memory and a pecan pie from scratch, because that was what I had always brought to the table, literally and otherwise. Preston's mother, a woman named Sylvia who had never once said anything warm to me in 18 months, made a comment at dinner about the casserole being a little sweet for her taste. I said nothing. After the dishes were cleared and his family had gone, I was in the kitchen washing the last of the pans when Preston came in. I thought he was getting a drink. Instead, he leaned against the counter and said it. Clean, flat, final. You're a burden, Dad. You always have been. Pack what fits in one bag. You're not coming back. I turned off the water. I set down the pan. I turned around and looked at my son-in-law the way I used to look at contractors who told me their concrete was load-bearing when the numbers said otherwise. Steady, Waiting. He had a folder in his hand, I hadn't noticed. He set it on the counter and slid it toward me. Inside was a printout from an assisted living facility called Meadow Ridge, about 40 miles outside Columbus. He had already filled out the intake form. My name was on it. My supposed health conditions were listed: mild cognitive impairment, difficulty managing daily tasks, some mobility concerns. None of it was true. Renee and I discussed it. This is the right decision for the whole family. I looked toward the doorway. Renee was standing there, same as before. Same floor tiles. Is this what you want? I asked her directly. She said, Dad, it really is a good facility. They have activities. Then she walked away. They drove me there the following Saturday. I had one weekend bag, the photograph from my wedding that had sat on my nightstand in their house the whole time, and Barbara's oatmeal bowl that I had kept for no logical reason except that I couldn't throw it away. Preston talked the whole drive. Traffic, weather, how the facility had really high ratings online. Renee stared out the passenger window. Meadow Ridge was a long beige building that smelled like industrial cleaner and reheated chicken. The intake coordinator was a young woman named Ashley, who spoke to me in a careful, simplified tone that told me Preston had given her the same story he'd written on that form. When I tried to explain that I hadn't chosen to come, Ashley glanced at Preston and said, "It's very common for residents to feel some initial resistance. That's completely normal." Preston signed papers. Renee hugged me once, quickly, the way you hug someone you're leaving at the airport when you're relieved the goodbye is almost over. Then they left. I watched Preston's Audi pull out of the parking lot from the window of my assigned room, and I noticed he did not look back. My room was a single with beige walls and a window overlooking the parking lot. They had taken my cell phone. Preston had said it was an old model and will upgrade it when you're settled in, and my wallet with my cards. He had kept those for safekeeping. I had $40 cash in my jacket pocket that he apparently hadn't thought to check. For 48 hours, I said nothing to anyone. I watched. I cataloged. I'd spent 3 decades as an inspector, and the habit doesn't leave you. You walk into a space and you automatically assess what's holding and what isn't. What I saw in those 2 days was a facility that was not unkind. The staff was tired but decent. The food was predictable but sufficient. But I also saw that I had no documentation, no access to my own accounts, no phone, and no way to verify what had been signed on my behalf. On the 3rd day, a man 2 rooms down came and knocked on my open door. He was about 72, heavy-set, with white hair, and the particular bearing of someone who has spent a long time making rooms pay attention when he walked in. He said his name was Chester Albright, and that he had heard me ask a nurse if there was a public phone in the building. "There is," he said, "but you have to know who to ask. Come take a walk with me." Chester had been at Meadow Ridge for 8 months. His son had placed him there following a small stroke, and while Chester admitted the stroke was real, the impairment his son had described on the intake forms was substantially exaggerated. I did the Sunday crossword in 40 minutes this morning, he told me as we walked the garden path behind the building. I've been doing it in 40 minutes since 1987. He showed me the payphone near the loading dock, a relic attached to the maintenance building that the staff used when their cell service cut out, and that residents technically had access to but no one had told me about. I borrowed $3 in quarters from Chester, and I called the one number I still knew by heart after 30 years. Bernard Okafor answered on the second ring. Bernard and I had worked together for 11 years when I was with the city. He was a civil rights attorney now, private practice, mostly housing cases, but he had a formidable mind and a longer memory for injustice than anyone I had ever known. When I told him where I was and why, there was a silence on the line that lasted about 4 seconds. Then he said, "Don't sign anything else. Don't give them any information. I'll be there Wednesday. Tell the staff I'm your attorney and they are legally obligated to allow me access." He arrived Wednesday at 2 in the afternoon, wearing a dark overcoat and carrying a leather briefcase that I recognized from 11 years of site visits. He sat across from me in the visitor's room with a yellow legal pad and asked me to tell him everything from the beginning without leaving anything out. I talked for an hour and a half. When I finished, Bernard closed the pad and looked at me the way he used to look at building inspection reports when he spotted the line that changed everything. "Wallace," he said, "they put you in a facility using false medical documentation. That's fraudulent institutionalization. Preston signed intake papers misrepresenting your mental status. And if he has access to that joint account, he does, then we need to move fast, and we need to move quietly. The worst thing you can do right now is tip them off that you have legal representation." He was right, and I knew it. I had watched enough contractors in my career try to patch things over once they knew an inspector was looking. You don't show your hand until you have everything documented. Bernard came back the following Monday with his associate, a young woman named Zoe Ishida, who specialized in elder law and had the particular focused intensity of someone who takes injustice personally. She had already pulled the intake documents. She had already identified the name of the physician whose signature appeared on my supposed cognitive assessment, a Dr. Emmett Tran, whose medical license had been flagged by the Ohio Medical Board 2 years earlier for signing paperwork without conducting examinations. "He charges $800 per signature," Zoe told me, her voice level and precise. "Bernard's investigator found 3 other families in the Columbus area who used him for similar purposes in the last 18 months. I sat with that for a moment. My son-in-law had paid $800 to have a doctor fraudulently certify that I had dementia. I had helped put that man's kids through college by being the steady financial backbone of his wife's household for the better part of 2 years. Bernard spread out his documents on the table between us. "Here's where things stand. Preston accessed the joint account the day after he dropped you off. He withdrew $22,000 in 2 transfers, cited as facility expenses and administrative costs. The facility records show they received $8,000 of that as your 3-month prepayment. The remaining $14,000 went somewhere else." "Renee had a new car last month," I said, remembering something Chester had mentioned when I described them. "She drove by here once. Silver SUV. She had driven a 6-year-old Civic the whole time I lived with them." Zoe made a note without looking up. "That fits the pattern. We're also seeing that Preston has contacted your financial institution about changing the account to sole ownership based on a power of attorney document that," she paused, "that appears to use your name but is not your signature." Forgery. The word sat in the room between us like something with weight. Bernard leaned forward. "Wallace, I want to get you out of here today. I have grounds. I can file an emergency petition for wrongful institutionalization. The judge can order your release within 24 hours. I shook my head. He had expected that. He waited. "If I walk out today," I said, "Preston adjusts. He's a real estate man. He knows how to restructure a deal when the terms change. He'll say I got confused, that I consented, that it was a misunderstanding. He's smooth. He's been smooth the entire time I've known him. If I leave now, the only evidence we have is what we can prove from the outside. But if I stay a little longer, he keeps moving, and every move he makes is another line in the file." Bernard studied me. "How long?" "Give me 3 weeks. Document everything. Then we act." Chester became my ally in ways I hadn't anticipated. He had spent 8 months at Meadow Ridge and knew the rhythms of the place, which staff members were observant, which were indifferent, when the administrator did her rounds, when the security cameras in the common room had the best angles for recording conversations. He lent me a basic prepaid phone he'd had his nephew bring during a visit, small enough to keep in a jacket pocket, and that phone became the lifeline that changed everything. I called my neighbor from Columbus, a retired electrician named Dale Forsyth, who had lived across the street from Barbara and me for 19 years. Dale was 68 and built like a retired linebacker and had the particular quality of someone who had spent a lifetime fixing things other people couldn't. I explained the situation. He said, "Tell me what you need." Within a week, Dale had quietly visited my old bank branch and spoken to the manager, a woman he knew casually from the neighborhood, who confirmed that a power of attorney document had been presented for my accounts and that she had flagged it because the signature didn't look right to her. She had put a hold on the change pending verification. Preston had apparently called twice, increasingly frustrated. My granddaughter Lily was 12 now and sharp in the way that children are sharp when they've been paying attention to adults for years. Renee had told her I had gone to a health center to rest. Lily had, on her own, found Meadow Ridge's address in an email on Renee's laptop that she'd left open on the kitchen table. She called me on a Thursday afternoon from the school bathroom, whispering, "Grandpa, I know where you are. I looked it up. Are you okay?" I had to breathe for a moment before I could answer her. "I'm okay, sweetheart. I need you to listen very carefully, and I need you to trust me," she said. "I already don't trust Dad. I heard him on the phone 2 nights ago saying you'd probably last 6 months before you got moved to the state facility. Children hear everything. They always have." I told her what I needed. She was 12. I almost didn't, but I thought about the kind of person my granddaughter was going to be, and I thought about whether protecting her from this moment would serve her, or just keep her ignorant of something she had already seen clearly. "I need you to notice things," I said. "Big purchases, new things in the house. If you hear your dad on the phone talking about property or accounts or a lawyer, you remember what you can and you tell me. Can you do that?" She said, "I've been doing that for 3 weeks, Grandpa. I have a notebook." By the time Bernard came back 2 weeks later with Zoe and a second attorney, a forensic specialist named Howard Price, who handled financial fraud cases, the picture was complete, and it was considerably worse than I had initially understood. Preston had withdrawn a total of $31,000 from the joint account through a combination of transfers and cash withdrawals. He had submitted the forged power of attorney to 3 separate financial institutions, trying to access my pension rollover account, and a CD Barbara and I had opened 15 years earlier specifically earmarked as Lily's college fund. The CD was $64,000. The bank had blocked the attempt, but the paperwork existed, and Zoe had certified copies of it. He had also contacted a real estate attorney about my interest in a commercial property I owned in a small strip mall outside Westerville, a unit I had purchased in 2009 that I rented to a small accounting firm, and that generated $2,200 a month in rental income. He had filed a preliminary claim asserting legal authority to manage the property on my behalf, citing the fraudulent power of attorney. Howard set a financial timeline on the table. In 4 months, Preston attempted to access or liquidate assets totaling approximately $420,000. He succeeded with $31,000. The rest was blocked by bank compliance protocols or timing, but his intent is documented. Lily's notebook, which she had photographed page by page and sent to me through an app her friend had helped her download, showed that Preston had paid cash for a home gym system delivered in December, that Renee had bought $3,000 worth of furniture from a Columbus boutique the week after Thanksgiving, and that Preston had taken a 4-day solo trip to Miami in January that he told Renee was a work conference. Bernard looked across the table at me. "Wallace, we have forgery, fraudulent institutionalization, misappropriation of funds, attempted fraud on 3 financial institutions, and conspiracy with a licensed physician who fraudulently certified a non-existent diagnosis. That last one brings Dr. Tran in as a co-defendant. This is a serious federal and state case." "I know. Are you ready to move?" I've been ready since the Saturday he didn't look back when he pulled out of this parking lot. The process that followed was not dramatic in the way that movies make things dramatic. It was methodical. It was paperwork. It was Bernard filing an emergency petition for wrongful institutionalization on a Wednesday morning that a judge reviewed and approved by Thursday afternoon. It was Zoe coordinating with the Ohio Attorney General's office. which had already opened a parallel investigation into Dr. Tran. It was Howard delivering a formal fraud complaint to the FBI field office in Columbus, where a white-collar crimes agent had apparently been watching Preston's real estate business for an unrelated reason and was very interested in what we brought them. I was released on a Thursday in late January, 63 days after I had been brought to Meadow Ridge. Chester walked me to the front entrance and shook my hand with both of his. "Go do whatever it is you're about to do," he said, "and make sure it sticks." I moved into Dale's spare bedroom that night. His wife, a woman named Patricia, unrelated to any Patricia my son-in-law would ever know, made pot roast and didn't ask me anything I wasn't ready to answer. I slept 8 hours without waking. The simultaneous delivery hit on a Friday morning. A sheriff's deputy served Preston at his office on High Street at 9:45. A second deputy served Renee at the house at 10:15. Bernard hand-delivered a certified letter to Dr. Tran's home address. The bank fraud complaints landed electronically at the same moment. Preston's cell phone records, obtained through the investigation, later showed that he called Renee 11 times between 10:15 and noon, then called his attorney, then called the number in Florida that turned out to be his brother's. Lily texted me 2 words from the school bathroom: "It happened." I didn't respond immediately. I was sitting in Bernard's conference room watching the pieces come together with the particular satisfaction of someone who has spent a career waiting for structures to either hold or fail. These were failing, and they were failing all at once, which is what happens when you let the cracks develop fully before you call the inspector. I went to the notary 3 weeks later. Bernard sat on my left. Dale sat on my right because I had asked him to, and he had driven 40 minutes in February sleet without complaint. The notary, a careful man named Joseph Wickham, read the document through completely before looking up. What I had written was not a simple will. It was a restructured estate with specific intent behind every line. Lily received 60% of everything: the strip mall property, the pension accounts, the CD that was always intended for her anyway, and a separate trust to cover her education without restriction. She was 12, and she had been braver and clearer-eyed than any adult in her immediate family, and I was not going to let that go unacknowledged. Dale received $15,000, which was less than he was worth for what he had done, and more than he would ever accept comfortably, which was why I had Bernard build it into the document so he couldn't decline without legal consequence. He laughed when I told him that. It was a good laugh. A portion went to Chester Albright's family, designated specifically to fund improvements at Meadow Ridge's residential wing. Chester's idea, which he had suggested during one of our walks, and which I thought was the right kind of response to a place that was not itself cruel, but had been used as a tool by someone who was. A donation to the Ohio Elder Justice Coalition, an organization I had not known existed 60 days earlier, and now had reason to care about deeply. And then the clause that took me the longest to write, the one I rewrote 4 times in Dale's spare room, the one I asked Bernard to read and reread until I was sure it said exactly what I meant. Renee received nothing from the estate directly. Her name was removed, but there was a provision. If she completed 2 years of weekly family therapy with a certified therapist, not a counselor Preston recommended, not someone convenient, but a licensed therapist chosen by an independent committee, and if she submitted written documentation of genuine engagement in that process, and if she made a full written accounting to Lily on Lily's 18th birthday of every decision she had made from the day I moved in until the day I was released, then and only then would a monthly stipend of $1,000 become available to her, managed through a trust that Lily would control. It was not forgiveness. I don't know if I will ever arrive at something that deserves to be called forgiveness, but I had spent 31 years as an inspector who believed in structural accountability. The idea that you document the failure, you require the repair, you don't pretend the crack wasn't there, and you don't issue a clearance to a building that hasn't been actually fixed. Preston received nothing. The criminal process would handle Preston. Joseph Wickham signed and stamped everything with the formality that document work requires, and the kind of face that suggested he had seen a great many things in his years at that desk. When it was done, he said, "This is an unusual document, Mr. Merritt." "I'm an unusual situation," I said. He nodded. "I hope it goes the way you want it to." I told him I had stopped wanting things to go a particular way. I wanted Lily to have what she was owed. I wanted the record to be accurate. I wanted, if it was possible, for my daughter to look at a piece of paper one day and understand, in plain language, what she had allowed to happen. Whether she did anything with that understanding was up to her. The criminal case is still moving through the system, which is the nature of criminal cases. Preston was charged with financial elder abuse, forgery, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Dr. Tran surrendered his license and reached a plea agreement. The FBI investigation into Preston's real estate dealings produced 2 additional charges unrelated to me, which apparently had been building for some time. Renee filed for divorce in March. I didn't learn about it from her. I learned about it from Lily, who called me on a Sunday evening, my new phone, my new number, from her bedroom in a house that was now only hers and her mother's. "Mom's been crying a lot," she said. "I think she's starting to understand." "What do you think about that?" I asked her. There was a pause. A 12-year-old thinking. I think she knew more than she says she knew, but I also think another pause. I think she got scared of him and then she didn't know how to unscare herself. I've been an inspector for 31 years. I know what it looks like when a structure has been compromised for so long that the people inside it have stopped noticing the tilt. That doesn't mean the building isn't dangerous, but it does mean the failure isn't always simple. I have a small apartment now, second floor of a building 10 minutes from Dale and Patricia, with a balcony where I can see a stretch of the Scioto River between 2 buildings if I stand at the right angle. I do the crossword every morning. I have rebuilt the birdhouse project because Lily asked me to. She wants to start a proper bird-watching list and she needs the right feeders. She comes over on Saturday afternoons, when she can, and we eat lunch, and she asks me about the kinds of things 12-year-olds ask about when they trust you, which is to say, the real things. I don't know what my daughter will do with the provision in the will. I wrote it because I believe, or I am trying to believe, that the person I raised is still somewhere underneath the person who stood in that kitchen doorway studying the floor. I may be wrong, but I spent a career making sure the record was accurate, and the record now says she was given a path. What she does with a path is, as it has always been, her own responsibility. Chester moved into an independent living community in March, closer to his family, which was what he had wanted from the start. He sends me a crossword clipping from the Columbus Dispatch once a week, with his completion time written in the margin. Last week it said 18 minutes, and I believe every second of it. I am 67 years old. I have a granddaughter who carries a notebook and notices things. I have a friend of 30 years who drove in February sleet without being asked twice. I have a lawyer who answered on the second ring. I have a balcony and a river view, and Saturday afternoons and the particular kind of quiet that comes not from things being easy, but from things finally being honest. That is enough. That turns out to be exactly enough. The thing I keep coming back to even now is the pan. I had just set it down in the sink. I had washed dishes in that kitchen for 18 months. Their kitchen, in their house, in the room at the end of the hall that was never quite mine. And it was in that ordinary moment, hands still wet, pan still warm, that Preston said what he said, not with rage, with the flat certainty of a man who had already decided, already filed the paperwork, already counted the money. I've thought a lot about what makes a person capable of that, not the cruelty itself. Cruelty has 100 explanations, and none of them are interesting. What I mean is the specific kind of person who looks at someone who loved them honestly and decides that person is only worth what can be extracted from them. I don't think Preston was born that way. I think he got there the same way most structural failures happen, gradually through choices that each seem small at the time, until one day the load-bearing wall is gone and nobody noticed it going. What saved me was not luck, though people keep saying that. Bernard answering on the second ring wasn't luck. That was 30 years of showing up for each other. Chester knocking on my door wasn't luck. That was a man who had kept his wits sharp and his instincts intact because he refused to let confinement convince him he was diminished. Lily photographing pages of a notebook in her school bathroom wasn't luck. That was a 12-year-old who had been paying attention to the adults around her for years and had quietly decided that honesty mattered more than comfort. What I learned, what I am still learning, is that the people who come through the worst things are not the ones who felt no fear. They are the ones who stayed clear-headed when everything was designed to make them confused, who kept their moral bearings when someone was actively trying to convince them they no longer had the right to any, who refused to move until they understood the full shape of what they were dealing with. I was 67 years old, in a beige room with $40 in my jacket pocket, and the most important decision I made was to think before I acted. Not because I wasn't angry, because I knew that anger spent too early is evidence wasted. Preston counted on me falling apart. That's the whole bet. That grief and isolation and the slow erosion of being told you're a burden will eventually make a person stop trusting their own perception. He was wrong about me, but I want to be honest, he might not have been wrong about someone else. There are people in facilities like Meadow Ridge right now who do not have a Bernard or a Chester or a Dale who drives in February sleet without being asked twice. That fact does not sit easily with me, and I don't think it should. I spent my career documenting what holds and what doesn't. The honest accounting of a structure, where the load is, where the weakness is, what will fail under pressure. That's not pessimism. It's the only foundation on which anything safe can be built. The same is true for a life. You cannot build something that lasts on the pretense that the crack isn't there. Lily comes on Saturdays. She is working on her bird watching list. She has 17 species so far, and she is very serious about the documentation. I watch her write in that notebook, the same careful attention she turned toward her father's phone calls and her mother's silences. And I think that what she is becoming was always in her. It just needed someone to tell her it was worth something. That is the only inheritance that matters to me now. Not the accounts, not the property, not any of it. The fact that she knows, because I showed her, not told her, that paying attention is not paranoia, that keeping records is not pettiness, that standing your ground when someone is trying to convince you that you have no ground left is not bitterness. It is the only honest response to being underestimated by people who should have known better.